Good morning. It's January the 16th, 2024. Here we are exploring the scriptures for this upcoming Sunday. That would be Sunday, January the 21st, I think, if I have that right. Look at me trying to do math in front of you. The scriptures this week are quite long, so I kind of want to plunge right into it. But I do encourage you to think about all of the things that might be impacting the way that you encounter God's inspired word this week. So it could be directly in your own life or things in the news or whatever it might be. You can pause this video and even write down all of the things that you think may be affecting how you experience this interaction with God's inspired word. Our readings now are in the lectionary year. We're in the Green Sundays. We're moving from the baptism of Jesus into his public ministry. That's kind of the movement of the lectionary as we have it. So our Old Testament reading now swings in some ways from where it has been. Genesis is where we were with the baptism of Jesus, into different scriptures of the Old Testament, particularly looking at those figures who are called by God's grace to ministry and service, as that aligns with some of the earliest aspects of Jesus's ministry, particularly his call of the disciples, which we have one episode of this morning and this Sunday, and which will follow again next Sunday. So we begin with Samuel, and the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, are books about the figure Samuel and his life as a servant, as a priest of God. And it starts with the stories of him as a child. That's pretty much where we are now. You could read back to the first couple of chapters to his coming into being, and ultimately the pledge that his mother had made that if she were to bear a son, that she would essentially give him over to God's service. So in service to God, and that was at that time, in a sense, a literal, in childhood, giving over one's child to learn what it was to be a priest and to lead the people in their religious life. So we're kind of picking up that story in the third chapter as Samuel is still a child, still a boy, but now beginning to have this experience of encounters with God and ultimately what will come to define his life. So we have the third chapter, the first 10 verses, and this is how it reads there. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. So Eli was the head priest. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called, "Samuel, Samuel." And he said, "Here I am," and ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called for me." But he said, "I did not call, lie down again." So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, "Samuel." Samuel got up, went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call, my son, lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again a third time, and he got off and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." It is an option to continue on with the next 10 verses, but I really only wanted these first 10 as part of our focus here. So we have this beginning of what is going to be the relationship of God speaking to and speaking through Samuel for what will unfold. Samuel is serving in the temple at this time under the guidance of Eli. We have Eli, who it says eyesight has grown dim, may have had in some form or fashion, whether it's immacular degeneration in the sense that we have words for this now, or whether it was simply the clouded eyesight of oh shoot, I'm forgetting their name right now. But anyway, it just came and it just went. So he doesn't see real clearly. And this is simply capturing a moment in time in the temple life. And this moment in time is apparently late at night. There was this lamp that was lit in the temple, and we have that referenced here. The lamp of God had not yet gone out. So this lamp was a way sort of to keep the light of God on, if you will, or a sense that the presence of God was there in the temple. We have Eli lying down in his own private chambers, and Samuel laying down in the temple. That's where he's at. And we have then God calling Samuel. Samuel, being a boy, thinks that it's Eli that's calling him. Now, the number of times ends up being very important in some ways. There's 3 times that Samuel is called. So 3s, 7s, 12s are important numbers. And so here we have 3 being the number of times that Samuel is called. Through the first 2 times, he runs to Eli and says, basically like, yep, you called me. That's essentially what we have, is Samuel thinks that Eli is calling for his help. Now, maybe that's part of why Eli's eyesight is referred to, is that he needs help to get around because he is not capable of seeing very well. And so having a young boy, Samuel, there helps Eli to see. So we have that repeated 2 times. And then that 3rd time is when Eli says, something's different. Now, we had at the beginning of this passage a sense that it was not often that the experience of God's, an encounter with God, particularly God's voice, was happening in that time. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. So that sense of encounters with God had become very limited. And so Eli himself perhaps was not perceptive that this was going on until that 3rd time when he says, there's something different here because it's not me calling. Maybe it's, one of those rare occurrences where God is showing up and calling uniquely this boy, Samuel, in the temple. And so, being his mentor, he guides him into what to do. Okay, if you hear this again, say this. And that's basically an expression of being receptive to what God has to say. So rather than running away from it or shunning it or dismissing it, this is saying, I'm ready to do your bidding. And that's where the story ends. Now, this is a powerful scripture as we start the year because we've gone from the birth of Jesus and the epiphany of Christ, so the arrival of the Magi and ultimately their journey back after this encounter with the light, which begged us to ask, what about us? How is our journey different? Into the baptism of Jesus, and now following the baptism of Jesus, a question of how is our life also going to be shaped or formed different? And so that is where we are at in regards to this Sunday is, okay, with the Spirit of God upon us, are we ready to really actively engage God? So when God calls upon us, that we will be responsive to what that is. Or perhaps we already have a sense of what's not right in the world, and maybe we've been ignoring it or blind to it, and God is calling us, and we keep running to the wrong source, thinking that that's where the answer lies, and the answer lies with God. So there's lots of ways to interpret this, and you might think about what are the ways in which God is calling us that we might be dismissive of, and really what we need to do is say, God, I'm ready, here I am. Now let's move to the New Testament reading. As I said, the scriptures are rather long this week, so I don't want to spend too long dwelling on any one so that I keep our time brief, less than 20 minutes in your time with me today. And that reading from the New Testament is from 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 12 through 20. And the church in Corinth, my general guidance as we encounter any of the readings from the Corinthian correspondence, which have some incredible lines from Paul. 1 Corinthians 13 is used all the time in weddings, sometimes in memorial services. It's beautiful, and there are beautiful sayings within here, little morsels, if you will. But in general, the Corinthians couldn't do anything right. And so when Paul writes to them, he's trying to guide them back to the right way to practice and enact their faith. Sometimes it's because they're overzealous. That is, they're trying to be too holy. So they go overboard thinking if a little of something is good, more of it must be even better. Or sometimes it's just they can't get past the people that they were prior. So they are converts to Christianity, and their old patterns of behavior kind of keep surfacing up. So we encounter him here, the 6th chapter. So we're pretty deep into the body of the letter. So this is the point at which Paul is really trying to provide corrective action. And this is what he says there. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Food is meant for the stomach, and the stomach for food, and God will destroy both one and the other. The body is meant not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And God raised the Lord and will also raise us by his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Should I therefore take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Do you not know that whoever is united to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For it is said, the two shall be one flesh. But anyone united to the Lord becomes one spirit, one in spirit with him. Shun fornication. Every sin that a person commits is outside the body, but the fornicator sins against the body itself. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, which you have from God, and that you are not your own? For you were bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body. So a big piece of what we have here, obviously, is there are behaviors still going on in Corinth that do not align with what a Christian life should be about. And so Paul is being very strong in his language, using prostitution, so that is paying for the desires of the flesh, as a way to correlate in how it is juxtaposed against a union with God. So that is an interaction and relationship with God. And that our bodies are part of, an integral part of our expression, our connection with Christ, and our relationship with God. And so what we do with our bodies matters. And so that's why we have all this bodily stuff mixed up in here, such as food. Food is for the stomach, stomach for food. God will destroy both. The body is not meant, basically the body is not meant just for your own pleasure. But the body, what you do with your body, what you do with your life, is meant for God. That is ultimately what our body's for, is how we use these things to do God's will in the world and how they express God's grace to the world. And so understanding that these things are members of Christ, an extension of Christ. We talk about the church and the various people of the church being members of the body of Christ. So it's a way of seeing our own body as an extension of Christ's body, that each one of us is a representative, our bodies themselves, in what they do and how we care for them and what we express with them and what we don't do. And so then we have Paul taking on these things to really try to bring this into relief, using sexuality and sexual actions as a way to try to amplify his point. Could they have been involved with these things? There's a very good chance of that, but it also is a way just to try to really say, be aware of what you do with your body and what others are aware that you do with your body. Not just in a sexual sense, but in the sense that, again, everything that we do with our bodies should be an expression of Christ. So let's take this in a different direction. We're in traffic, someone cuts us off, or we're at a stop sign and somebody ignores the four-way stop and they blow through it. We lay on our horn and accidentally we throw up a gesture, and that gesture has a certain expression, and that expression, it may be linked to a word, and that word may be linked to fornication. And so how is it then that we, instead of expressing Christ in the sense of forgiveness and grace for mistakes, for errors, we end up expressing something very different? Even if it's simply thinking in our heads. When somebody in front of us at Wegmans jumps into the 15 items or less line and has a cart full, but the person checking out doesn't say anything, but we in our head are thinking, why are you doing this? And we think negative thoughts about them. How we cleanse our minds and ultimately even the expressions of our bodies. Because if we don't think that what we say with our face and ultimately what we say with our with how we are posed expresses to somebody else our feelings, we need to keep ourselves in check. How are we expressing Christ to the world? So how are we perceptive of ourselves, and how ultimately they are communicating, being an extension of Christ's body to the world? Let's jump into our final reading here, which is John chapter 1, verses 43 through 51. So we're picking up right after the baptism of Jesus, okay? The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip, said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth. And Nathanael said to him, Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, Come and see. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said, Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. Nathanael asked him, Where did you get to know me? And Jesus answered, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. Nathanael replied, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Jesus answered, Do you believe me because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So this is the call of the first disciples as reported by the Gospel of John. And we have here first Philip, who he asked to follow him. And that also Philip is from the same place as the disciples Andrew and Peter. Philip finds Nathanael, who also becomes a disciple, and says, we, so this is the implication that he, Andrew, and Peter, three of them, have found this one that they, in looking at the scriptures, see as the fulfillment of these scriptures. So that is Moses in the law and the prophets. And says it is this person named Jesus. He is the son of Joseph, and he comes from Nazareth. That's essentially what Philip says to Nathanael. Now, Nathanael knows the reputation of Nazareth, and the reputation of Nazareth as a community, as a region, as a town, isn't good. It's a backwater, nowhere place that nothing special comes out of, and you don't expect anything. So think of whatever backwater, backwoods, boondocks, name it whatever you want in your mind, or perhaps from your own background, that you can think of a town or region or city that nothing good comes out of. And it would be shocking to have a prophet, somebody who really is amazing, to come out of that place. And that's what Philip is saying to Nathanael, and Nathanael saying, there's no way, Nazareth is no good, and you know that. But nonetheless, Nathanael, it sounds like, follows Philip to check out this guy that Philip's talking about. And Jesus, while far away off, says, hey, look, here comes an Israelite with no deceit. So he's essentially saying, here's a person of upstanding character. And Nathanael says, okay, like you know me? How do you know me? And Jesus refers to basically something that had happened earlier where Nathanael was resting under this fig tree. Now, this indicates to us in some ways that Jesus has capabilities that are beyond what we might consider normal. Now, this is a beginning of understanding that Jesus, while being fully human and is going to experience all of the things that it is to be human, temptation and pain and even death, also is fully divine. So that is all-knowing, all-powerful, everywhere present, and so capable of seeing things that others cannot by virtue of that. Now, it's because of this that Nathanael comes to the conclusion that Philip already has told him, which is, oh my gosh, you are the one, just like the scriptures have said. And Jesus' reference to him, and this becomes commonplace in the gospel, is you think that just because I told you something which seems so hard to believe because I wasn't physically there, is why you've come to believe. But just you wait. You're going to see more amazing things. You're going to experience more amazing things. heavens opened, angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So it's really kind of foreshadowing what is to come in the ministry of Jesus. And I think for ourselves, perhaps we too can sometimes become dismissive about Jesus and say, hey, he was a great person, did amazing things, people followed him. He made people who were otherwise shunned or felt left aside to be embraced and to feel whole. But we don't think we don't elevate it beyond that. And really, part of what's being expressed here is our own call to discipleship. Others may tell us about how incredible Jesus is, but it's only once we are willing to hear for ourselves. And ultimately, when we do hear for ourselves, it will change our experience moving forward. And we will have incredible things that will happen as a result. That as we move into the life that lies ahead, as we journey with Jesus in our faith, we will see the heavens open. We will see things that seem impossible and incredible and transformative and lives changed. So those are our scriptures for this week. We've reached that about 20-minute threshold, so I don't want to prolong this, but I encourage you to go back and read them again if you can. Even a couple of times would be great. You can always go to a website like BibleGateway.com, pull up a couple of translations, a couple of different translations, something like the Message is really different or the Contemporary English, just to give like a little spice, if you will, into hearing these scriptures differently. And part of that is when we then come to encounter them in worship, we really come with ears open. And then as they are proclaimed, perhaps we're able even to appreciate that proclamation of that inspired word even more. Always a joy to be with you as we explore Sunday scriptures. And I look forward to seeing you again next week as we explore the scriptures for next Sunday. God bless you. Bye-bye.